introducing to you this morning a good friend of mine, Pastor Dave McGarrah, representing CUFI. That's Christians United for Israel. Let's give him a hand.
Well, it's so good to be with you guys. You probably have the best kept secret here in Jerome. Place ought to be packed out. Yeah, I think so. I'm good to go. They got me lit up. Nice to be with you guys today. My home is in Caldwell, the happening place of Idaho, the epicenter. And it's been my privilege to have roots here in the Magic Valley. So years ago, my wife and I moved to Gooding. It was our very first church. And they gave us that church because they knew we couldn't wreck it anymore, and it already was. And we'll throw them in there. They can't hurt the thing, you know. And so we moved to Gooding and had such excitement about being in this small community and the possibilities of what God would do there. Most frightening thing that happened to me on my first week was I realized these people actually think that I know what I'm doing, you know, and so that put the fear in me. But the church was running a strong 20 at the time, and just 20 great people. But you know, the Lord is good to infants and idiots, and I fit in there quite nicely somewhere. And God says, listen, I got to help that kid. And so he helped me, and he helped us. And we had wonderful years there and just fell in love with the people of Gooding and the Magic Valley. Our youngest was born in Twin Falls, and we just so enjoyed being here in the area of the Magic Valley. So it's a delight for me to actually be able to worship with you today and enjoy being back in some of the area that I cherish greatly. You know, the memories I have of the Lord's goodness and the Lord's blessing and meaningful moments between us and Him and the people that were entrusted to us at our church that loved us and helped us grow up and taught us much about the Lord, and we hope that we've been able to reciprocate that across the years. But walking through the doors today just was very much like home, and just you're welcome, and the fellowship that you have here. You should not keep this place a secret. However, just a word on the other side of that, if you go overboard inviting all your friends here, it's going to cost you money. So you need to figure out where to draw the line, right? But the Lord is blessing you here, and it's a privilege for me to be with Pastor Fritz and have a chance to get acquainted with him. I've always had a big heart for Calvary Chapel. They've always been people of the Word, always valued the Bible immensely. It's the book, and they've always had a great heart and passion for Israel. And so besides pastoring a church, I also do some work for Christians United for Israel. And I want to share some things today that I think will be a blessing to you when it comes to the nation of Israel and the people of Israel. When we talk about Israel, we're talking about really the promises and the purposes of God Himself, because His heart is great towards the land of Israel and the people of Israel. It's the most dearest piece of land on the face of the earth that captures His attention and His heart. And He cares about the whole world, but Israel, as is declared in the Scriptures, is the apple of His eye. And He makes no bones about that. So I think one of the things that God awakens in our heart as followers of Christ is we want to connect with the eternal. We really want to know God. We want to walk in the light and be used by God to be the hope of the world as we share Christ and be light in a world that so desperately needs it. So Christians United for Israel stands with Israel. And the reason it stands with Israel is because Israel is eternal. And I think, could you click me one time there? I was hoping I could. My guys in the back, we paid them extra today to help me. Yeah, here we go. So Israel is eternal. And this is so cool because it means that it's never going to be removed. It's in the Father's heart, and it's never going to be out of his heart. And the reason that it's in his heart is because what God says will in fact stand forever. So God is the one who says what he will do, and then he does what he says he'll do. So this is the God that we serve, that God that is so upfront and declares himself. Now, Israel goes back about 4,000 years, and one of the things that I've recognized across my years of getting acquainted with God's heart towards Israel across the years. You know, when I was living in Gooding, Israel was pretty much just kind of a biblical place. It wasn't something that I recognized as the rebirth of what God had promised that he would do. That I didn't realize that modern Israel was biblical Israel. I thought across my years that Israel was just kind of a biblical place. And all through college and ministry prep, you know, there was not ever an emphasis on the prophetic role of Israel, what the Bible had to say about how God really does feel about Israel and the Jewish people. So for a lot of people, Israel is nothing more than just kind of a Bible story place. And they don't see it as the fulfillment of prophecy, that people are living there and God is drawing his people back there, that the place is alive and well and it's back in its original homeland. You know, Israel isn't a place that just once was. It is a place that is now. It now is, ever since May of 1948, when by a miraculous act of God, it was birthed in a single day. I mean, think about that. Isaiah says, can a nation be birthed in a day? Before she goes into labor, the baby shows up. Now, how would you like that, ladies? You know, it would be a miracle for a nation to be born in a day, and that's exactly what happened. On May 13th, 1948, there was no Israel. On May 14th, 1948, there was Israel. So Israel is a place filled with very real people living real lives and fulfilling the prophecies of God even today. Do you know that we are living in Bible times? God is fulfilling his word in our day and our time, and it should tell us that the return of the Messiah is so close, because the things that God says he would do before the return of Christ are actually happening. So we're taught in the word of the Lord to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. But that prayer is just a starting place. There's so much more that we can do. We have a chance to do so much more for Israel. We have that opportunity to be watchmen on the wall, as Isaiah speaks about in chapter 62. He describes the chance that we have to line up with God's mandate and for Zion's sake not be silent. Now, that doesn't mean that we're more loyal to another nation over our own, but it means that Israel matters to God, and because it matters to God, it should matter to us. And that's such an important thing, so that when you walk out of here today, if you hear nothing else, you should be reminded that Israel matters to God, so it should matter to me. And we are so fortunate to have the chance to be connected with the Jewish people. So much so because Abraham was given the promise of God that, listen, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. So you can't love Israel and the Jewish people without getting a blessing. You you as a congregation love Israel and the Jewish people, God is going to bless your church, your congregation, because it has a heart for Israel. He's going to do that to us personally. So that's one of the benefits of being a lover of our Jewish Messiah. We have a heritage, but we also have some responsibility. Israel is living proof that God keeps his promises because he cannot lie. God is a promise-making God and a promise-keeping God. And we believe that. We believe that so much that we've bet the farm on it. We believe that he means what he says and that he will do what he says he'll do. We believe that. We have staked our eternity on that belief in God. And so Israel is the testimony throughout eternity that God will keep his promises. And that is so important for us. So Israel's not only eternal, but it's also biblical. And this is one of the things that so many times this is where people stop seeing Israel. They know it's in the Bible, but they don't really know the role that it has played historically and the role that it is playing historically. But it's a nation and a people that's built on the very covenant word of God himself. In Genesis 12, did you bring your Bible today? Over here in Genesis 12, God spoke to Abraham about making a people that will be a light to the nations. And so in Genesis 1, we know that God spoke the heavens and the earth into existence, that God is the owner of all of his creation, and he can do with that which he created whatever he wants to do with what he created. So he tells us over here in chapter 12, the Lord said to Abram, leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the place that I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you'll be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you. So, this says that he's going to take that land that he created and that he is going to give it to Abraham and his descendants. And that forever title deed to the land that's given to Abraham and his descendants is recorded right here in the book. And so chapter 15 of Genesis, God makes this covenant promise to Abraham, not with Abraham. And if you know the story, the reason I say he didn't make that with Abraham, but made this covenant promise to Abraham, is because when you entered into a covenant with your brother, with your companion, with this person, you made a sacrifice. You took a bull and a ram and some doves, and you split them down the middle, and you laid them out, and you and your covenant partner walked down between those animals sacrificed. You walk down pledging your lives to each other, and you come back around and you walk through it again, and you do that 3 times, and you're saying to each other, listen, you care about me and I care about you. Something happens to me, you'll take care of my family. Something happens to you, I will take care of your family. You have money, I have money. I have money, you have money. You are so dedicated to this that you mix blood, you share sand, and you say to one another, if for any reason I break this covenant, may you do to me what we've done to these animals, split me right down the middle and separate my sand out from yours, meaning it's impossible. Well, God knew that Abraham couldn't keep up that side of the deal. And so he puts him to sleep and gives him a vision. And God walks down between those animals sacrificed in that covenant made to Abraham. He walks by himself. And that covenant was underscoring that it was not going to be dependent on what Abraham did or didn't do. It was fully dependent upon God, who God is. And this is such a great resting place for us, friends, because his work in us is not dependent upon us. It's a work that we can't earn. It's a work that we don't deserve. It's all based on what Christ has done for us, which is what we were singing about this morning. Thank the Lord. So chapter 15 of Genesis, God sets the borders of the land. And in chapter 17, he establishes that this line of the covenant will come down through Abraham's descendants, in particular his son Isaac or Yitzhak. And he reaffirms that this is an eternal covenant. It's going to last forever. So what you have in Israel is a group of people who live there today because of the promise that God made to Abraham multiple millennia ago. And Israel becomes the proof that God is a promise maker and a promise keeper. And the title of the deed has been recorded over and over and over in God's word. His purpose and his promise did not end with the writing of the New Testament. Now, one of the things that we rub up against these days is what's become known as replacement theology, a teaching that is killing the church in so many ways. And what is that theology? It's a theology that says that the promises of God, the covenant that God made with Israel, has been replaced by the church. And it's been replaced by the church because the Jews rejected Christ as the Messiah. And I would say to you that the Bible declares that that is totally a lie. That's bogus. That misrepresents God's promise that he made to Abraham. And this kind of theology is just killing us. Because what it communicates is you don't need to worry about anything that has to do with Israel and the Jewish people. They don't see Israel prophetically at all. Over in John chapter 4, Jesus engages a woman who's at the well drawing water. And in their dialogue, Jesus says, that salvation is of the Jews. In Romans 11, verses 1 and 2, Paul tells the world that God has not rejected his people, but that the Gentiles who come into the kingdom of God have actually been grafted into what God began with the Jewish people. Romans 15:27, you may be familiar with this, but Paul goes on to say, since we as believers have been grafted into this incredible thing. And what is that incredible thing? This spiritual blessing, that we could enjoy the promises that God made to the Jewish people and Abraham. We get grafted into that. And because we experience those spiritual blessings, Paul goes on to say that we owe it to the Jews to bless them materially. In other words, we should take some action and show them our love and our valuing that they belong to the Lord. And so God continues throughout his word and speaks to us about the Jewish people and his continual plans for their future. So here's the Bible, so what? The biblical so what this morning. And here it is. You cannot say that you love God, but you don't care for Israel and the Jewish people. You can't say that if you really love God, because he is so dedicated and so committed to Israel and the Jewish people, and the fact that he has not rejected his own people. So this is such an important piece that we realize this. There is no plan B. God's carrying out the plan exactly the way that he made it. So the rebirth of Israel in 1948 is proof that against all odds, God birthed Israel into existence just like he said he would. And I love that. I love that about the Lord. Harry Truman was in the office at that time in the White House, and against all the advice of his senior cabinet to not embrace and endorse Israel as a state, within 11 minutes, Harry Truman made an announcement to the world to recognize and endorse the state of Israel being in existence. And America, thank God, has continued to stand with Israel ever since. And because America has been very committed to stand with Israel and endorse and embrace Israel, they have become an ally to us this very day. It's the only ally that we have in the Middle East. And the direct result of that has been the blessing of our own nation, because you can't love and care about Israel without being blessed. And God has blessed America because America has blessed Israel. So for those who wish for Israel to be wiped off the face of the earth, that same bunch that wants that to happen wants that same act to happen to the United States. We're just viewed as the big Satan, and they're viewed as the little Satan. And so it's hard to believe that the major organization that we know as the United Nations, some refer to it as the United Nothing, who voted to make that land available so that Israel could actually become an existing nation, it now continues to legislate against this small and the single only democratic nation in the Middle East, with one resolution of condemnation after the next, all in opposition of Israel at every level. And so Christians United for Israel has given itself to make sure that if there's ever a nation that stood with Israel and for Israel, it will be the United States of America. Congress just a couple of months ago reaffirmed its commitment to Israel. And over the years, presidents and Congress, senators and representatives have overwhelmingly stood with Israel because they know that you always stand where God stands, and God stands with Israel. And so both the U.S. and Israel share this same heart, and their same heart towards the world, even towards those nations that actually hate us or hate Israel. And one of the things that I love about this is that Christians United for Israel continues to do everything it can with the government policies that assure that we will always stand with Israel and help Israel and be a friend and a partner to them. Because listen, standing with Israel is not a political issue. It is a Bible issue. It's a biblical issue. So it's really important for us to recognize that Israel is not only eternal and not only biblical, but Israel is also light. It's a light to the nations. When Israel was birthed, God intended it to be a light to the world, a light to the nations. The last part of verse 3 says, "And all the peoples of the earth will be blessed through you." You will be a blessing to the world. If you know the story of Laban, Jacob's father-in-law, in the book of Genesis, Laban is an interesting piece of work in the Old Testament. He had his share of idiosyncrasies, definitely quirky. But because Jacob was his son-in-law and was living among him, he became a very, very blessed man. And the reason he did is because he began to see the light of God through Jacob. During the famine in Egypt, Pharaoh and the Egyptian people prospered during that time of famine, not because Pharaoh was a tremendous leader, but because God had strategically put a guy by the name of Joseph in Egypt at the time, and God raised him up to become an amazing light because he was faithful to God, and God blessed Egypt because of Joseph, and all the world was saved. In the book of Acts, we read about a Gentile man by the name of Cornelius. The Bible says that he was generous to the poor and that he loved the Jewish people, and God heard his prayers. And he became the first recipient of the gospel. He's the first one that the disciples presented the gospel to, and he became the first convert in what we have come to know as Christianity. And the writer goes on to, in fact, he goes out of his way to underscore that Cornelius had such an incredible love for the Jewish people that God chose to bring the light of the world to him personally. And as a church, when we partner with the Lord, one of the things that God does is he causes his church, his people, to become a light to the world and carry on the very thing that God began with the Jewish people. Do you know it was the Jews who brought the light of God's word to us? They brought us the patriarchs. They brought us the prophets. They brought us Mary and Joseph. They brought us our Messiah. They brought us the disciples, the gospel. All of that is light. And the brightness of God shined through Israel because God intended Israel to be a light to the nations. There's a very well-known phrase among the Jews. The Hebrew is tikkun olam, meaning to repair and to heal the world. And that's exactly what Israel intends to do since its rebirth. That it moves into the areas of our world with compassionate ministry wherever there's a hardship or a tragedy. And you see this in their history. They've been doing this for over 40 years. And what underscores this uniqueness about them is they're typically the first ones on the scene. And you can chase this down and do your homework, but whether it's floods or storms or earthquakes or fires, Israel tends to show up. They were here right after Katrina. They went to Turkey, Japan, the Philippines, Dominican Republic, Mexico, Sri Lanka. The ravaging fires in northern Cal over the past few years, the Israelis were there doing rescue missions, serving the people. I just read this morning that they sent out yesterday teams of search and rescue to Morocco, where they just had this horrendous earthquake. Just back in February, with a horrendous earthquake that shook Syria and Turkey and cost thousands of lives, Israel was the first on the scene right after the earthquake hit. These are two nations that don't care if Israel even exists. And here they were going to serve. They remain a light to the world. Their descendants, the descendants of Abraham, have been and continue to be a blessing to our world. So don't even get me started about the contribution they've made in the world of medicine or technology or water desalinization. They've got an enormous project, 2 of them, happening in California due to the lack of drinking water. Their desalinization system is so fantastic that they actually have to add salt back in it to make the water tasty for the people to drink. The contribution they've made to agriculture, and think about the mind-blowing inventions and the procedures and the cures that have impacted our world. You know, if you ever wanted to see the difference that a person can make, you shut off your iPad, your iPhone, your MacBook, your Apple computer. You shut that down for 24 hours, and you'll see the contribution that Steve Jobs made to our world and the impact that it had on you personally. That pales in comparison to all the contribution that Israel has made to our world. When it talks about boycotting Israel, sanctioning Israel, the BDS movement, divesting funds so that you have no investments in any Israeli company. For those people who really want that, they're all hypocrites because they want to destroy Israel economically, but they'll still use all of the things that Israel has its fingerprints on. Every Boeing airliner, every cell phone, virtually every computer, so many medications, so many medical procedures. Their fingerprints are all over that and more. But these people who want to destroy Israel by boycotting all the stuff, they continue to thrive because of Israel's blessing upon the world. So I'm telling you, Israel is a light and continues to be. And then Israel is hope. And I love this. It is the hope for peace in the Middle East. You know, Israel is not the problem in the Middle East, it's the solution. We have a word that we're familiar with that comes from the Hebrew. It's called shalom. It means peace. Jesus got a hold of that and incorporated that into the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are the ones who come and proclaim shalom, that pronounce this blessing. Well, Christians United for Israel is not anti-Arab. They are not anti-Muslim. They are not anti-Palestinian. Do you know that you can be pro-Israel without being anti-Palestinian? Kufi is anti-hate. And while there are those who hate Israel and chant for its annihilation, it's not the people who are really the instigators of that at all. It's their leaders. The vast majority of those people who live in Iran, who disagree vehemently with their leadership when it comes to Israel. The same is true for the Palestinian people who live under the heavy hand of Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. These are the ones who want to drive the Jews into the sea. They don't want peace with Israel. They want peace without Israel. In spite of that, Israel still continues to hold out hope in the Middle East. And just so you know, every offer that's been extended from Israel, by Israel, to the Palestinians and the surrounding neighbors, land for peace, has been rejected. Every offer since their birth in 1948. Go back the year before that, the 1947, the UN partition plan that offered the Jews a place there back in their homeland. The Jews said yes, the Arab nations said no. Within 24 hours, they were trying to extinguish the newborn baby. 1967, following the 67 war, the Khartoum Conference, the Arab nations declared no, 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 the three no's. No peace, no negotiations, no recognition of Israel. Now, it's very difficult to try to work out some sort of peace agreement with the nations who don't even want to admit that you exist. That's a very, very difficult challenge right there. Nevertheless, they continue to strive for peace among a people who doesn't even want to acknowledge that they exist. Go back to Camp David, the year 2000, 2001, 2008, 2009. Every time Israel met at the peace table, the Arabs said no. When Israel pulled out of the Gaza Strip in 2005, they moved all of the Jews out of the entire area of Gaza, and they left everything there to set up the Palestinians for success. The first things that the Palestinians began to do, directed by their leaders, was to wipe out every Jewish fingerprint, destroy vineyards and farmlands, homes and buildings and businesses. And shortly after that, they began to fire rockets out of there towards Israel. So I'm telling you, the answer has always been no, and these efforts and so much more have resulted in refusal for peace. Golda Meir, the former prime minister, said, until the Palestinian people love their children more than they hate the Jews, there will be no peace. Yet Israel remains a bastion for hope. I've been to Israel some 50 times. Back in March, I visited a community that's located right up against the fence, the security wall that separates Gaza from Israel. I visited the people that live there right next to that fence. And they were telling me that when the sirens go off, letting them know that rockets have been fired, they've got about 8 seconds to get to their bomb shelter. And this is why we continue to contend with Congress to renew their support militarily of Israel, that we would support them. And yet, while that goes on from Gaza, Israel continues to supply water and electricity to the people who live there in Gaza while they fire rockets in return. Israel is indeed hope. But last of all, Israel is resilient. Thank God for this. I mean, there's no shortage of history that tells the story of the efforts to annihilate the Jewish people. Read the story of Haman in the book of Esther. Read the story of Sennacherib in the Chronicles. You'll see the hatred of the Jews. There's a plethora of books that unfold the overwhelming efforts to extinguish this people group. Hitler wasn't the first, and he won't be the last. He's certainly not been the last. And don't think for a moment that we should take the threats of the Iranians lightly. Somebody says they're going to kill you, you should take that honestly. But they view Israel as a cancer that should be removed totally from the face of the earth. Anti-Semitism has now risen to pre-Holocaust levels. Now listen to me. The hatred of the Jews has reached pre-Holocaust levels. And those levels continue to raise its ugly head, and it has shown up in Idaho more than ever. We have increasing acts of anti-Semitism happening within our own state. I view it as one of the contributing factors is the amount of growth that we've had in the state of Idaho over the past few years. With that comes all kinds of things that people bring with them, including hatred of Israel and the Jewish people. We've had anti-Semitic acts, Wood River High School. We've had acts of hatred in Boise. It's raising its head more and more all the time. And its ugliness is fueled by sheer hatred. For the Jewish people, their temple was destroyed, the people were scattered, and no matter where they were scattered to, whether it was Spain, whether it was Russia, whether it was Europe, they were targeted to be destroyed. They were ridiculously blamed for so many different things, and the end result was that millions upon millions were murdered, including children, no shortage of children. But thank God this people group is resilient. You know, the Jews take a pretty tough hit by having fingers pointed at them about being difficult or hard or unbendable. If you trek with their history, the only way that they've been able to survive is being stiff-necked in God's hand. But these people are resilient. They're a people of promise. And they believed that God would one day get them back in their homeland. And they don't live as victims. They are resilient. Isaiah promised that God would bring the people back from the four corners of the earth and never again be removed. And God promised that the desert would blossom like a rose. And I tell you, if you go to Israel, you will see them coming home by the droves. Since the beginning of the Ukrainian war with Russia, over 70,000 Ukrainian Jews have come back home. And it wasn't just escaping so that they can turn around and go back later. No, these people have left, and they are now Israeli citizens. These people, God is drawing them back, and the desert is been turned into a rose. It is absolutely amazingly beautiful. So, in the midst of all this, they continue to have the most resolutions against them, more and more and more, from all the other nations combined. The haters of Israel want to ruin the economy of Israel. They want to destroy Israel through the BDS efforts, boycott, divest, and sanctioning of Israel. Against wiping out any history that the Holocaust ever happened. Can you believe this? But they're back. They're in their land, and they're thriving, and they're growing, and they're blessing the world, and we're the recipients of that. They are resilient. They are not going anywhere. God has made the promise to these people, and he means to fulfill it, and that's exactly what he's doing. So when God speaks to us about his heart, I think it deserves a response. This place here was not built to just be an information dump. It was here so that the word of the Lord could be proclaimed, so we could receive it, so it could do something in us and transform us and do something through us when we walk out the doors. True? We don't just come here to soak it up. We got to do something with it. And that's why when God speaks to us about his heart, it deserves a response. So we need to get serious about Israel. We need to stand and make some noise without requiring the Jewish people to change their theological position before we're willing to stand with them, before we're willing to make noise on their behalf. And we need to take down the lies that are told about Israel and the Jewish people. And that's why Christians United for Israel takes pastors and students and leaders to Israel so they can see the truth. Because I can tell you, there are nations of the world and the enemy himself that hates it when people go and visit Israel and see what God is doing. You arrive at the airport, it's a melting pot of the world. It's not apartheid. They're not occupiers of the land. Proven over and over and over by their archaeology. No matter where you dig in Israel, you dig up Jewish. You dig up Jewish. You don't dig up Arab, you dig up Jewish. You see that everywhere they dig. You see the proofs. And it's been underscored over and over and over that Israel has always had a presence in the land. It deserves the support of people, especially Christian people, because they're under fire. So, we pray for the peace of Jerusalem, but that's just the beginning. So, because Israel is, Christians United for Israel is. And we've endeavored to create some wonderful opportunities of what we can do. Israel has put together the Israel course, and you maybe received a book when you came in. It's loaded with all kinds of information about Christians United for Israel. But if you go to their website, cufi.org, and then you just put in /the Israel course, this is the most phenomenal piece that you will ever have. It's thorough and it's wonderful. It starts with the beginning of biblical history and it goes on to current and modern where we're at. It covers all kinds of great things. It has maps and pictures and videos where you can just click on it, and it is amazing. So one of the things I want you to do is make sure that you leave today with one of those books, okay? Because that Israel course you can just get by ebook, okay? You can order one if you want, but it's free by just going to cufi.org. You can also sign up, get a daily briefing. It gives you the latest stuff going on in Israel, helps you to see how you can pray for Israel, stand with Israel, be informed. They also send out a weekly overview. You can become a congressional liaison. What does this mean? It means that when there's action to be taken with policies and legislation, that you can become one who speaks on behalf of that. You can attend the annual summit in Washington, D.C. It's always a place to get your jets lit. It's always a place where they download all kinds of great stuff in us, and we're equipped so that we can talk about it intelligently and be well informed and understand what's actually going on instead of what the news is not going to tell you. Then we always, at the summit, we go up on Capitol Hill and we lobby on behalf of Israel. And we get into the office of our congressional leaders. And I'm telling you this, in Idaho, we are so blessed to have our 4 congressional leaders are all pro-Israel. Not every state has that. We are very fortunate. We've actually got anti-Semitic people serving in Congress that hate Israel and hate the Jewish people. Can you imagine have to try to get into their office to talk to them about standing with Israel and supporting Israel? We do it anyway. We go into those offices and we do it anyway. We get a chance to get up on Capitol Hill and walk the halls of Congress. Your CUFI membership, and I'm going to tell you in just a moment how you can become a member of that, is critical. This started 14 years ago with 400 people. It's now over 10 million. And we have a voice. And let me tell you how that works. We passed legislation here in Idaho. And one of the things that helped me a bunch is when I went to meet with the committee of legislators to introduce the anti-BDS legislation here in Idaho, which says that the state of Idaho will do no business with any company or corporation who boycotts Israel. We will invest no funds in any of the retirement funds of any of the Idaho employees. We will not invest those funds with any company or corporation who will boycott Israel. So when Ben & Jerry's decided that they were going to pull their ice cream from the biblical part of Israel known as Samaria, they call it the occupied territory. We're not going to allow our ice cream to be sold there anymore because the Jews are occupying land that doesn't belong to them. Ben & Jerry's is owned by a major corporation, a conglomeration called Unilever. Soon as that happened, all the states that have the anti-BDS legislation went into action. There's 31 of us that have passed that legislation. It immediately said, you know what? We're going to do no more business with your company if it's in our state, and we have investments in your company, and you go through with that, we're pulling that. They were looking at losing $65 billion. And you know what? They said, you know what? I think we'll change our mind. And this was so good, and Idaho was a part of that. Well, when I sat with that committee, I had the privilege of telling them that we have 65,000 CUFI members in Idaho. And that really spoke to them. Wow. There's quite a few that are behind this. So it wasn't just me sitting there. I told them I had 65,000 CUFI members sitting with me making this presentation. So your membership is really critical. And then we have a chance to partner on these state issues. So here's how you get a chance to become a part of Christians United for Israel. In that book, I think, is a Israel Pledge card, I think. Is there an Israel Pledge card in there? I believe so. Isn't there? You can, let me see this one piece just a second here. Yeah, here it is. Here's the Israel Pledge card. There we go. So it looks like this. It looks like this. On the other side is this. Take a moment, fill this out, and leave it. Leave it on the table, because these are sent into Christians United for Israel. And you have an opportunity to receive the daily briefing. They'll just send that to you on your email. This pledge is not about money. It's about saying, I believe that Israel has a right to exist and a right to defend herself. That's what this pledge is. I'm going to stand with Israel and make some noise on her behalf. That's what this pledge is. Has nothing to do with money. Are you with me? Whew, boy, wasn't that good? Okay, so look, that's super important. This is more important to us than an offering. Okay? Secondly, if you want to do the QR code, you could just go there and you can fill it out right online. You don't even have to mess with this. And you can also pull it off of that insert that you've got. There's the QR code right there, okay? But these are things that we can do. And one of the best things that you did is what you did today. You showed up. You showed up. And you got a chance to have the truths of what Israel is and how God is using Israel and the Jewish people. You have a chance to take and do something with that which has now been downloaded in you. And we can partner together with the work on behalf of Israel, because we want to do everything we can to get as many people committed here in Idaho that we can possibly do that. I serve as the state coordinator for Idaho, and so it's been a real privilege for me to have a chance to be here with you guys today. And Pastor was so good to allow me to have a chance to come and share this with you. But your heart for Israel means a lot to God. Your heart for Israel will result in your church being blessed, and your heart for Israel will result in you being blessed, because that's the promise that God made to Abraham. I'm going to bless those who bless you. So I say today, bless you, and thank you for your heart for God and for Israel. Thank you.